In 2002, the US government made a quiet but fateful decision. It sold off its entire strategic silver reserve, 135 million ounces of physical silver, accumulated over decades as a national security asset, and used the proceeds to fund routine budget expenses. At the time, silver was trading at just $4.50 per ounce. The move was hailed as fiscally responsible, a way to reduce debt without raising taxes. Few understood the long-term cost. Today, in 2026, that same silver would be worth over $12 billion. But more importantly, the U.S. no longer has a strategic stockpile of a metal now deemed critical by the Pentagon, essential for radar systems, missile guidance, satellite communications, and next-generation defense electronics. Without it, America is vulnerable to supply shocks from adversaries like China, which controls 60% of global silver refining. This isn't just a story about missed profits. It's a cautionary tale of short-term thinking eroding long-term security. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why silver was once a strategic reserve, how and why it was sold, why the Pentagon now classifies it alongside lithium and cobalt, and what this means for U.S. industrial sovereignty, defense readiness, and your own financial resilience in an era of resource nationalism. To grasp the significance of the 2002 sale, we must first understand why the U.S. held silver in the first place. Unlike gold, which served as monetary backing, the U.S. stockpiled silver for industrial and military necessity. During World War II, silver replaced copper in electrical wiring when copper was needed for shell casings. The Treasury even minted coins from manganese-silver alloys to conserve strategic metals. After the war, the Defense Production Act of 1950 formalized the concept of strategic and critical materials, and silver was placed on the list due to its unmatched conductivity, reflectivity, and thermal properties. By the 1970s, the U.S. strategic stockpile held over 200 million ounces of silver, stored in secure vaults across Texas and Missouri, not as an investment, but as a wartime buffer. The logic was simple. In a crisis, if imports were cut off, the U.S. could still produce essential military hardware. But by the 1990s, that logic faded. With the Cold War over, globalization in full swing, and markets deemed efficient, policymakers began viewing the stockpile as dead capital. Why hold metal that sits idle when it could be sold to reduce the deficit? In 1996, Congress passed the National Defense Authorization Act, which mandated the sale of the entire silver reserve by 2006. The goal was to eliminate what was seen as an outdated relic. Between 1998 and 2002, the General Services Administration, GSA, auctioned off 135 million ounces, roughly 4,200 metric tons, at prices ranging from $4.20 to $5.10 per ounce. The total revenue, $580 million. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $1 billion today. It covered less than 0.03% of the 2002 federal deficit. Yet, the strategic cost was immense. Once sold, the silver vanished into industrial supply chains, jewelry, and private hands, impossible to recall. Fast forward to 2026. The world has changed dramatically. Clean energy, digital warfare, and AI-driven defense systems have made silver more critical than ever. A single F-35 fighter jet uses over 1,000 ounces of silver in its avionics, radar, and communication systems. An advanced radar array for missile defense requires 500 to 800 ounces. Solar panels for forward operating bases rely on silver paste for efficiency. And with the rise of electronic warfare, demand for high-reliability silver components has surged. According to the Department of Defense's 2025 Critical Materials Assessment, silver is now classified as a Tier 1 critical mineral, the highest risk category, due to three factors. 1. High supply concentration. China refines 60% of global silver. Mexico and Peru produce 40% of mine supply. 2. Low substitutability. No other metal matches silver's performance in high-frequency electronics. 3. Growing demand. Defense, aerospace, and renewable energy sectors will increase silver consumption by 35% by 2030. Yet the U.S. has no strategic reserve. Zero. While China holds an estimated 200+ million ounces in state-controlled vaults, and India maintains a 50 million ounce strategic stockpile, the U.S. relies entirely on the open market. This creates a dangerous vulnerability. If geopolitical tensions escalate, say a blockade of the Panama Canal or sanctions on Mexican exports, the U.S. military could face delays in producing critical systems. In 2024, the Pentagon conducted a war game simulating a 6-month disruption in silver supply. Result: production of key radar and communication systems dropped by 40%. The lesson was clear. You can't fight a high-tech war without silver. But the problem goes beyond defense. Silver is now embedded in the civilian infrastructure of national security. Electric vehicles use 25 to 50 grams per unit for inverters and battery management. Solar farms, the backbone of grid resilience, require 10 to 12 milligrams per watt. 5G base stations depend on silver for signal integrity. Even medical devices like antimicrobial wound dressings and diagnostic equipment rely on it. The Department of Energy lists silver as critical for the clean energy transition. Yet, unlike rare earths or lithium, there is no U.S. policy to secure silver supply. The 2022 Inflation Reduction Act subsidizes solar and EVs, but doesn't address the raw material bottleneck. The CHIPS Act funds semiconductor fabs, but ignores the silver needed for advanced packaging. It's like building a car without securing tires. Why did this happen? Because silver was misclassified as a commodity, not a strategic asset. Gold got attention as a monetary metal. Oil had OPEC. But silver, industrial, unglamorous, and abundant, was overlooked. Even today, most investors see it as a speculative play, not a national security imperative. Yet the data tells a different story. Global mine production peaked in 2024 at 880 million ounces and is now declining due to water shortages in Latin America and permitting delays. Recycling meets only 20% of demand, and industrial consumption hit a record 620 million ounces in 2025. The result? A structural deficit that's pushing prices toward $100 and making every ounce a potential target of geopolitical competition. In 2025, recognizing the gap, the Pentagon quietly began exploring options to rebuild a strategic reserve. Proposals include direct purchases from domestic miners like Hecla and Coeur Mining, leasing silver from private investors through the Defense National Stockpile Center, mandating that a portion of IRA-funded solar projects source silver from U.S. refined supply. But progress is slow. Budget hawks argue it's too expensive. Industry says the market will adjust. Yet history shows otherwise. When the U.S. sold its helium reserve in the 1990s, it triggered a global shortage that delayed scientific research and MRI machine production for years. When it offshored rare earth processing, it handed China a monopoly that took a decade to challenge. Silver could be the next self-inflicted wound. For ordinary Americans, the implications are both practical and symbolic. Practically, silver shortages could delay the energy transition, raise EV costs, and weaken defense readiness. Symbolically, the 2002 sale represents a broader trend, trading long-term security for short-term convenience. We've done it with manufacturing, with rare earths, with pharmaceuticals. Now it's happening with silver. The good news? It's not too late to act. The U.S. still has world-class silver mines in Nevada, Idaho, and Alaska. Refining capacity can be rebuilt, and policies can be updated to treat silver as the strategic asset it is. But time is short. As China stockpiles, as BRICS nations coordinate resource policies, and as clean tech demand surges, the window to secure supply is closing. The 135 million ounces sold in 2002 weren't just metal, they were insurance. And now, in 2026, America is paying the premium. The real lesson isn't about regret, it's about foresight. Strategic reserves aren't about hoarding, they're about optionality. In a fragmented world, the ability to act independently, to build, to defend, to innovate, is priceless. Silver may look like just another metal, but in the circuits of modern civilization, it's the silent conductor of security. If you want clear, fact-based analysis of how critical minerals shape national security, technology, and your financial future, without hype, fear, or conspiracy, subscribe to U.S. Silver Market. We track the real flows behind the headlines, because in an age of hidden shortages, understanding scarcity is your strongest asset.